Hi everyone, and welcome to week 10 of the vlog series here at Embodied Beings. This is Alexa, and this week I am talking to you about one of my favorite topics in yoga therapy and meditation, and one that I'm intimately familiar with, and that is compassion. Compassion doesn't usually come up as one of the number one healing mechanisms that we think of when we think of yoga therapy, but I want to share with you today some of the things that I've learned about compassion, what it really is about, my experiences with compassion and healing, and of course, how yoga works with compassion to heal us from the inside out. So first of all, a definition of compassion. We use the word compassion quite loosely sometimes, especially here in the West, but I want to emphasize that it's different from empathy. So in the Essence of the Heart Sutra by the Dalai Lama, he defines compassion as not empathy alone, but a sort of empathic altruism that actively strives to free others from suffering. And this doesn't necessarily mean taking action every single second of every single day, trying to save the world, quote unquote, but it means constantly cultivating the wish to free others from suffering and definitely keeping this embodied as we go through our lives. The Dalai Lama has also said many times that love and compassion are necessities, they're not luxuries. Without them, humanity absolutely cannot survive. And if that seems a little bit strange to you or a little bit extreme, then I encourage you to think about those times when the true essence of human compassion and a deep universal love come out, like in war, in famine, victims of violence. When these big kind of tragedies happen, we see people come out of the woodworks with compassionate words, compassionate acts, and a lot of help. And perhaps you've noticed this in your own life too, when you're going through a really difficult time and have this feeling of hitting rock bottom and reach out to people. They do, like they come out of the woodworks and are there to help, because at the root we're compassionate, loving beings. So my story with compassion, there's a lot, but I want to highlight my first experience with coming into contact with a truly compassionate being, perhaps the most compassionate being on the planet right now, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It was my first time in India about 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago now. And I went to the Dalai Lama's temple in Dharamsala for a teaching that he was doing. He does teachings at his temple in northern India, in Himachal Pradesh, when he's not traveling the world. And I made sure that I sat in a part of the temple so that when he would walk up the stairs and like walk around, clockwise of course, to where he would be sitting in front of everyone, he would pass right by me. I wanted to get as close to him as I possibly could just to be in his presence. And it's 8 a.m., he starts walking up the stairs, there's lots of security around him. And of course, everyone sitting around me, we like shuffle to the front, kind of the opening of this room we were in to be able to see him. And, you know, he slows down and says hi to some people and bows down. And the moment he came close to where I was sitting, I was in the second row of people to where he came and said hi. I just became completely overwhelmed with emotion. Like just being in the presence of this all-compassionate being made me break down in tears, and I had the feeling of being completely loved and also completely seen simultaneously. And that's an experience that I've only had a couple of times since, also with other enlightened beings. But that's what it feels like to be in a space of total compassion. Like, what a gift to offer someone else as a compassionate being, and what a gift to receive it, to just be in that presence. So I've been attracted to Tibetan Buddhism, since before I met the Dalai Lama, but I've cultivated some of their practices and like weave them into my yogic practices. I've done a 10-day silent retreat at Tushita Meditation Center, also in Dharamsala, and I study at the DNKL Center for World Peace here in Connecticut. So I've gotten to know more about like the nitty-gritty of compassion and the details of it, and exactly how to practice it. And it wasn't until this past year when I was in Thailand that I started to learn about the inner workings of compassion on the structure and functioning of our brain and why it works so well for healing. And I was actually prescribed a compassion meditation practice by my teacher, my yoga therapy healing mentor. When I was going through a tough time, I was doing like all these really intense yogic practices and looking into my shadow spaces and, you know, eating really healthy yogic diet, being very strict with my lifestyle. And the thing I was missing was looking at my own suffering and like holding myself compassionately in that space. So as I was looking into all of these wounds and going through these healing transformations with my practice, the thing that was missing and the thing that started to help me come into a more integrated space in my healing was the practice of compassion. So this is why I started to bring it into my own personal practice, my healing practice, several months ago. For healing, compassion is what we call an antidote for a lot of ailments, especially things like self-hatred, the feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of like guilt about not saying or doing the absolute perfect thing in any given moment. And this is what makes it so powerful. Like, it gives us the ability to hold ourselves like an all-loving, compassionate mother or enlightened being would do. And we can do this for ourselves in our own healing processes. So how yoga works, I could talk for a few hours about the inner workings on the brain and compassion, but I'm going to skip that for now and just focus on the main points. Firstly, it helps us to arrive in the body and feel at peace in the body. And it also helps us prepare the mind for meditation. So I've mentioned before how the body is not just this thing attached to our head. It's a mechanism, it's a vehicle we can use to shift what's going on in the body and to shift our emotional state. There's even an asana in classical hatha yoga that's known to help bring about compassion. It has a really strong effect on connecting the heart and the mind, and this is one of the main meditative postures we use when we're meditating on compassion, or we can just use it to calm down the body and establish this mind-heart connection. It also helps us to dissolve those barriers that prevent us from feeling naturally at peace in our bodies and our minds. And this is something that's really helpful, especially if you're the type A kind of person who wants to like do, achieve. It's not always about gaining more knowledge, like gaining more of this and more of that. It's about letting things go. So letting go of all of these barriers that we've built up through our wounding, through our conditioning, and protecting ourselves that prevents us from feeling our natural state of mind, which is peaceful, which is loving. And finally, compassion meditation itself. Of all the meditations, this is the absolute sharpest tool in the box for healing and well-being. And there was a really great study done in 2015 by a European neuroscientist, Dr. Tanya Singer. And she basically tested like different kinds of meditation, so compassion meditation, transcendental meditation, and a few other kinds, with different pools of social groups to see how does each one work on the brain and what effects does it have on different kinds of people. And she noticed that of all the meditations, compassion is the one that's most effective for pro-social behavior, for altruistic motivation, decrease in social stress, and like overall well-being. And even more than that, when it comes to healing from a yogic perspective, it works to bring us out of states of fear, of anxiety, of depression. It helps cultivate gratitude and overall calmness. And this is the state of mind that the body needs to do its deep healing, right? So it lets go of all of those difficult emotions in favor of bringing in more favorable ones. That's all I have for you today. Again, there's a lot more on the inner workings of what exactly is going on in the brain during compassion meditation. I'll post some things in the Facebook group regarding that. But I hope that you look into this a little more deeply in yourselves, practice compassion, cultivate a 5-minute per day compassion meditation, and check in with me if you have any questions or concerns, any comments on your practice. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.